company, Data Masons, is 100% focused on EDI and EDI integration and compliance. And we're focused on the Dynamics platforms. As you can see in this slide deck, we're currently certified for Microsoft Dynamics AX 2012 R3. We're also certified for Dynamics GP 2015, and we're nearing completion of our certification process for Dynamics NAV 2015. Today, organizationally and from a technology standpoint, we support all versions of Dynamics, in the case of AX, going back to version 2.5, which was released in 2000. Dynamics GP, going back to version 8, which was released also in the early 2000s, and Dynamics NAV 5.0, and that was released again in the early 2000s. So we're not just current with the current platforms, but we're also current. We don't deprecate our support for the older platforms for companies that are not able to migrate to newer versions, or for some reason don't have the wherewithal to do so. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about the top 10 best practices that we see for successful EDI integration projects with Dynamics platform. I'm going to give you a brief software demonstration. A lot of companies that come to these presentations, they want to see, okay, so how can it be done and see it actually working. So I'm going to take time to do a demonstration with a real integration exercise. And then I'm going to do a review, next steps, as well as Q&A, as Adam just said a couple moments ago. So with that, and I encourage you, if you have any questions during the course of the demonstration, feel free to submit them via the question and answer submission area in the WebEx, and we can go through them at the end of the demonstration. So for the first best practice approach for integrating EDI into ERP systems, the first thing that we look at and try to discourage is customizing the core ERP in order to make EDI work. Now, most EDI integrations that you're going to see today involve customization of the ERP. And the truth of the matter, and some of you that are on the phone today that have done EDI integration related work in the past, you see a lot of the heavy lifting and the processing being done by the ERP, where it's taking data, it's checking the data, making, doing data value substitutions and cross-referencing in order to get the data into a transaction state inside the ERP. And then when it comes time to sending data back out to trading partners, and you're forced to map all the data some way out of the ERP into a file or some other mechanism, including EDI specific data that has to be sent back to the partner. So you have to worry about turning around data that was transmitted in the original transaction. And because of the complexities of the relationships between organizations, so for example, if you're doing business with Walmart and you've decided to set up some of their geographies as separate customers, and they're shipped tos differently than, say, the way that they set them up, that can expand more and more challenges to making that integration process work smoothly. And again, customizations seem to never end when you try to embed them all inside the ERP. So we see that as being one of the more common type of scenarios that companies come to us and say, hey, can you help us with this issue? We've got this ERP platform. We are continuously customizing it. It takes us weeks and months to get new partners onboarded. Every time we do something new, it's a new surprise, and it just inhibits their ability to get to current platforms of the Dynamics system. Today, that's becoming even more important as Microsoft is pushing towards more frequent updates and enhancements to the platform as they move to the cloud. So customizing the ERP is not a winning strategy, and certainly in the case of EDI, it's a process that seems to never end because of all the new developments that are occurring in business-to-business type transaction processing. Second thing that we advise people to do is look carefully at their cost of ownership. And a lot of companies go into EDI integration initiatives thinking we're going to be doing this just to take care of this one situation that we've got to do something about. You know, we're going to lose a customer, we're going to lose a relationship if we don't do this. And then when they get into it, they realize, hey, this is beneficial for us. We're going to be more efficient. So let's expand our footprint. Let's do more with it. And when you get locked into into relationships that require some sort of fee for every transaction and document you process, the costs can spiral out of control. So we advise people to look at how they're going to be moving data and paying for their solution in the long term. Now, EDI systems and EDI projects can fail when the system cannot scale to meet the volume of the business requirement. So looking for something that can handle that, not locking the system while you're processing, you know, the ERP platform while you're processing transactions, or not being able to accomplish the task within a reasonable amount of time. So for example, if it takes you more than 24 hours to process a day's worth of transactions, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble and you're sure to fail. So scalability is something that should be very important and part of your evaluation of what's right for you or your company or not. EDI itself is based on standards. Now, EDI refers to traditionally, in a lot of people's minds, specific standards that were developed by standards associations like United Nations. So the United Nations created a standard for exchanging business transactions. That standard's called EDIFACT. In North America, it's very common to see the X12 standard used for EDI transactions. But there's always got to be a need to support non-EDI formats. So you may receive flat files like CSVs and fixed length files, or you might get XML. There are some XML standards out there like CXML. And the ability to select a system that can handle all those types of formats is important, because if it doesn't, then you're looking at potentially having multiple platforms and systems to handle the same tasks, which is certainly not best practice. If you're in the process of evaluating what's right or best for your company, you know, there's typically two approaches to buying a system. And it basically boils down to build versus buy. So do we program a solution by licensing tools and trying to put it together ourselves, or does it make sense to buy a solution that's already been built and is more of a setup as opposed to a large development project? One of our efforts has been to create something that's as close to being plug and play with the Dynamics platforms as you can get. And when you make a choice like that, you reduce your risk and certainly increase your visibility on what the overall solution is going to cost, because you're not trying to write specifications and try to foresee all the things that could go wrong. So we're strong believers in starting with a solution and then adapting the solution into your environment, as opposed to trying to build something with tools like BizTalk, Trusted Link, GenTran, or other types of data transformation products that don't really, let's say, accomplish the entire task, which again, typically leads to ERP customization. The sixth best practice is to work with someone who's an expert in not only the field of business transaction integration, but also ERP platform knowledge. So today, your organization runs one of the Dynamics ERP platforms, and having to explain how data gets integrated into NAV or into GP, or what the application integration framework is in AX, how eConnect works in GP, and what these tables do and where data gets stored, and what the options are for processing transactions and use of warehouse systems, etc., can really drag down your project in terms of efficiency and timing, but more so places a burden of support on yourselves or on parties that really don't understand. So getting an expert means that you can get an end-to-end service level, so that going from the partner into your Dynamics ERP platform, and from your Dynamics ERP platform back out to your partners, so that you're not left having to call someone. If I get this error, call this person. If I have this error, call that person. You want someone who's an expert in the whole picture. And when you utilize an expert that has a solution that doesn't force you into an unpredictable cost structure, like assessing transaction fees that may grow without a good idea of what they're going to grow to, you have the opportunity to eliminate unpredictable costs, which can have a serious impact on your return on investment in an EDI integration solution. So it's important to really understand what those costs might be in the future and factor them into your purchase decision. Now, there are different views of what automated integration of transactions look like in an ERP system. Some solution providers say, hey, we're going to get you compliant, but all you have to do is go out to this website and type data into a form and print out reports and key punch that information into your ERP system, and then print out reports from there, and then go up to the web form and do it there. And you might even be doing it for different partners. So if you're doing business for Walmart, you go onto their portal, and for another partner, you go to theirs, and you just have a very complex and time-consuming duplicate entry environment that can be very costly. Additionally, some EDI solutions put the onus on you to hit buttons at specific times and help the transaction through the process, as opposed to providing a lights out automation where you have end-to-end integration without anybody touching the system. And so that type of automation is something you should think about and get optimization in the processes, as opposed to just getting something that can create transactions but still require a lot of human involvement. And when you evaluate systems, you should look at flexibility in the way the business model of the service provider works. So for example, you might decide at one point that doing your own EDI mapping and your own compliance makes sense for your organization. And then circumstances change and you decide, no, I would rather have someone else take care of that for me. Or I'd even like to have the organization take over everything that's EDI related. I never want to hear, those letters together, ever again. I want someone else to take care of it. And like I said, circumstances changes. So what makes sense in 2015 may not make sense in 2018. So look for a solution and service provider that can change with your the evolution of your organization's requirements. And then finally, and I touched on this a little bit, but expect full automation. The concept of hitting buttons at certain times of day and looking at screens to find errors and so forth is very antiquated in a lot of ways. And it may look okay on the surface, but as you expand your use of technologies, it can become very time-consuming and require specially trained people to do certain activities. Our motto and our endeavor is to take EDI, automate it, and turn it into a management by exception type of experience, so that when transactions come in that need integration into the ERP platform, that can happen on a schedule that your organization defines, and then retrieves transactions and sends them out. And if anything happens in that process that requires involvement of a human, those people are notified. And if they don't, for some reason, follow through on resolving the error, we provide a framework to advise that person, or perhaps their supervisor or other members of the organization, a gentle reminder to say, hey, these transactions are still unresolved. We're not seeing them in dynamics, or these transactions haven't been acknowledged by your trading partner. And those types of exceptions and gentle reminders could mean a huge difference between a good vendor scorecard or a happy customer or receiving goods on time versus the reverse. So automation should be front and center in your mind when you think about how an EDI solution should work. So what I'm going to do now is provide a software demonstration of our solution. And our solution is called Vantage Point EDI. Vantage Point is a complete EDI processing platform that combines application functionality with advanced mapping and data transformation capabilities, with automation and robust flexibility to handle, unforeseen business, scenarios. So this version of Vantage Point, this flavor in my demonstration today, is going to be working with Dynamics Nav 2015. And when we architected the look and feel of the system, what we wanted to do was to provide a portal for our users to go in and see what was happening in the system and also understand how to use the system. And what we did was we took some of the most common process flows and we turned them into menu bars like this outbound invoice that I just clicked, and show you the process flow from beginning to end up here in the ribbon bar. Very similar to Microsoft Office type of approach, so that you know what it takes to get from beginning to end. So if you said, Glenn, how does outbound invoicing work? I would say, well, right here, it's a 3-step process, and this is what you need to do to get from the beginning to the end. Another common business process flow is inbound purchase orders. And when you look carefully at the process flow, a few things should jump out. The first is that we use terminology like send data and receive data. And in this case, I'm sending data over to Nav. In my case, it's a purchase order, which is ultimately going to create a sales order in my Nav environment. And then receiving data, in this case, it's a PO acknowledgement back from Nav. And then sending that PO acknowledgement that I've retrieved out of Nav out to my trading partner, creating the format that the partner wants, and doing all the business rules checking that the partner has specified in their documents. So Vantage Point is not just a translation and integration, but it also does advanced business rules checking according to what your partner wants. And just as a reminder, if you're concerned, well, how does those business rules get into the system? The answer is it's in part configuration, but mostly through maps that are provided to you that already meet your partner's requirements as they've published, and which can be tweaked, to maybe make it even more specific for your type of environment. This dashboard area is a dynamically updating alert and message system. So when you open up Vantage Point, you can see everything that's happening inside the system at any point in time. And you can drill into the messages that you see here so you can see what's going on. So for example, I have an outbound invoice that is on hold. And when I drill into that message, I see a transaction that's painted red. And what that means is that there's an error associated with this document. It could be multiple errors. And I can drill in to those errors and see that, okay, it's telling me that I've got a data element that's missing or not present. And if I want to know more about it, I can go to Help. And it tells me everything I need to know about it. And one of the things that is really great about Vantage Point is that not only do you get English language messages, but you can tailor them to your business requirements, so you can and what your team members feel comfortable with. So you can change all the error messages to be in a language that's comfortable for you, and you can put in solutions that explains what to do, including calling Brian if you can't solve the issue yourself. And these messages appear on emails that are sent to the business users, the functional users, when these errors occur, so that any sort of things that occur when an EDI process fails. So for example, customer orders a product that hasn't been set up, or are requesting that you ship goods to a location that hasn't been set up in Dynamics. You'll get English language messages sent to the right people so they can resolve these issues, as opposed to having the IT department, fix these issues themselves. Now what I'm going to do is take you through a sample transaction process. And I'm going to download a sample purchase order, and it's going to be in a format that's very common in North America, an X12 purchase order. I'm going to create a sales order in NAV through the send PO to NAV process. And then I'm going to ship the order in NAV, and I'm going to invoice it. And these processes are going to be used to pull the shipment and to pull the invoice out of NAV and transmit it to the trading partner. And I could hit the buttons that you see up in the flow menus to make all that happen. But I talked about automation earlier and the importance of that in our world, in the data masons world. And so I'm going to turn on a service that we call our EDI Workflow Scheduler. And the EDI Workflow Scheduler takes all of the things that you can hit a button for inside of Vantage Point and process it on a schedule that you define. So the screen that you're looking at right now is a monitoring screen of what's happening inside the EDI Workflow Scheduler. And one of the process flows that I've configured is a PO workflow inbound. And there are two key things about a workflow that's important. The first is frequency. How often do we want this process to happen? Or maybe we don't even want it to work on a frequency. Maybe we want it to work when an event happens. So for example, a file appears in a folder, and let that event wake up the workflow and let it run. So the concept here is enabling your team to define when you want these processes to happen. So for example, PO purchase orders downloaded and integrated into Dynamics, that might be something you want it to happen every 2 hours. So you just select your frequency, and then you have it to the frequency that you want. Now the second part of a workflow is the tasks that the workflow is going to invoke. So in my case, I've got 3 steps in my inbound PO workflow. The first is network download. So that means it goes out to a mailbox, like a value-added network or a VAN mailbox or direct connection to your partner, or a folder exchange internally. You might be doing intercompany business with related companies, and you want to have it all processed externally through using Vantage Point for a platform. So wherever that data resides and where it's being retrieved from, Vantage Point will go and get it. You just define a network for that. The second step is send PO to NAV. So you see the concept up here of sending the purchase order to NAV. And that's the end of the integration process. But I've added a report process to the workflow, so I can get a copy of the inbound document over to my Outlook. I'll open up Outlook so I can start receiving some of these emails as they come in. So when I come back to Vantage Point and I look at documents that have been received today, and you'll notice I'm starting to receive email alerts based on the workflow scheduler doing what I've told it to do, which is to send me reports, not just copies of purchase orders, but I have other standing reports that I've asked it to send me. And you'll see them pop up as we go through the demonstration. So the workflow scheduler, when I started it, which was at 3 minutes ago at 2:30 p.m., downloaded a purchase order. And this is what a typical purchase order looks like in the North American, EDI standard. And it's a pretty cryptic but very compact set of information that really tells me everything I need to know in order to fulfill the order. But to get this information into a true transaction state in any of the Dynamics products requires a lot of work. And that's where customization often is used. But Vantage Point takes that data and leveraging information in Dynamics, now in my case I'm using Dynamics Nav, it's going to transform that little bit of information into a sales order. And this is a sales order overview screen in Dynamics. I'm going to hit the refresh button. Oops, I'm going to lost my connection to the Nav, so let me just reopen it. Okay, so here's my sales order overview screen. And you're going to see this transaction down here is the same order that we just saw on the screen a moment ago. It's purchase order, MS Dynamics. If I open up documents received, you see the order number was MS Dynamics. That's right here. And I'll just note while I'm here, there's information that's sent on data coming in from the outside world that could be very important to transmission on the outbound side. So values that are important to your partners but are not relevant to you, nor have a home or a place to store this information inside of Dynamics, we capture all that information. And you're going to see in a few minutes where I leverage that piece of data as part of the outbound process, but I never integrate it into the Dynamics platform. So here's the sales order that I created in NAV 2015. The EDI Workflow Scheduler created this transaction after it downloaded the purchase order. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to post both a shipment and an invoice against this order that I just created. What you're going to see is an invoice number, it was 103053 was just created. And when I look at documents that I've transmitted today, what you're going to see is at 12:31, which was 1 minute after I downloaded my purchase order, I sent out a document which happens to be an acknowledgement back to my trading partner, Target, that says, hey, I received the purchase order successfully and everything is okay as far as the communications portion of this process. Now, the EDI Workflow Scheduler is processing away, and it's pulling in advanced ship notices on a schedule. And it's doing the same thing for invoices as well. And you can see the advanced ship notice, or ASN process, is working, or was working. It just completed a moment ago. And that's because That process is scheduled to fire every even minute. So right now it's 2:38. So it runs on the 0, the 2, the 4, the 6 minute of the hour. Because it's completed, I know that if everything has gone well, if I look at documents sent, I'll now see an advanced ship notice, which is, in the world of North American EDI, X12 is an 856 document. And so the process of posting that shipment was the point at which Vantage Point now sees a new transaction, which happens to be a shipment, for that purchase order, MS Dynamics. And you can see I'm getting an email notification that the process was performed successfully. And that can be turned on, turned off. It's all configurable. And so now I've got an advanced ship notice. Now it's 2:39 p.m. and I happen to know that invoices are scheduled for every odd minute of the hour. So if everything has gone well and I hit the refresh button, I now see a new transaction, which in the world of X12 EDI is an 810 document that's been retrieved and transmitted out to my trading partner Target. And an 810 document is an invoice. So the invoice that I created a few minutes ago is 103,053 for that purchase order MS Dynamics. And I know that this is cryptic, but this is the data that, in my case, my partner wants to see. They might want to see other file formats for other partners, but this happens to be the format that this partner is looking for. And in this document, I've got this ref value, IA 430, which was plucked out of the original purchase order and made part of the outbound invoice process. And that's a big deal because there's no native home for that value in Dynamics Nav, nor Dynamics AX, nor Dynamics GP. And unless the platform has the facility to handle that type of scenario, then you're left to dealing with customization and passing data back and forth. So it's a small thing, but it can be a big challenge among the many challenges that you have. Now, for those of you that use Dynamics, whether it's GP, NAV, or AX, you probably recognize that if you want to set up relationships between accounting values inside of AX or NAV or GP, say, for example, a customer like Target, and what transactions they process, whether they send you POs, they want purchase order acknowledgments, they want invoices, etc. There's no place to define those things in native Dynamics. So you need, the system either, again, needs to be customized, because you may not send out PO acknowledgments to every customer that you've ever set up. Maybe there's only 20 customers that do that. So Vantage Point gives you the ability to define those relationships, again, without customizing the Dynamics platform through trading partner maintenance. The other thing that I'll point out that Vantage Point is doing, and I talked a little bit about this, was the distribution of reports. And one of the reports that I received today was a copy of that purchase order I downloaded. And so that cryptic-looking document that you saw on the screen a little while ago was emailed to me in a much more human-friendly format. So this is that purchase order as it was received from Target in a format that's a lot easier for people to understand. So that's an example of a report. And in this case, this is a SSRS report, therefore customizable. I talked a little bit about exception management as being a very important part of good automation, which is part of the 10 best practices. And Vantage Point provides a framework to make sure that no transactions fall through the cracks. So I've got a couple of examples of those. One is what we call a sales order exception report. What this report does is it looks at the data inside of NAV, and it makes sure that what we've received and what we've told our partner that we have received, so we've successfully received this document, it makes sure that that transaction is where we expect it to be in NAV. So in the case of purchase orders to sales orders, I've got several documents that have not been, that I cannot find inside of Dynamics NAV. And one of them happens to be my purchase order, MS Dynamics. And the reason that it's showing that PO as not being inside of NAV is because at the instant that this report was generated, it had not made it through the process of the integration into NAV. So in that split second in time, this report happened to run where the transaction was downloaded but not yet in NAV. So if I regenerate this report, this disappears because the transaction is in NAV. This particular report takes a second look at the sales orders that are in there, and it does an audit of the value of the sales orders we created versus the calculated value from the purchase order to make sure that, hey, does this look right? Do the number of lines match up? Does the value of the order make sense? Now that's an example of an inbound exception report. And if I come back and I look at another one of the exception reports that I've configured to run, which is an invoice exception, outbound, specifically invoice, what you'll see is, again, a two-section report. The first section saying, here are all the invoices that I see in NAV that have not been brought into Vantage Point for transmission to the partner. And in this case, that's an empty area. So that means everything that's in NAV has been processed and transmitted. The second part of the report is looking at the acknowledgement status that has been sent back from Target. And this is very valuable because this enables our customers to proactively contact their customers that do EDI and say, hey, I see you haven't acknowledged our invoice. We sent it to you 2 days ago. Is there something wrong? And proactively, deal with what could be, 40 days from now, the phone call that says, hey, you didn't pay this invoice, and the response is, we never received it. So this enables you to proactively pursue those things. The same is true for PO acknowledgments, advanced ship notices, inbound invoices from suppliers, a wide variety of different types of transactions where it's important that the transactions get from the partner successfully turned into transactions inside of Dynamics, and then from Dynamics back to the partners successfully where they've said, hey, we received it and we accept it. So that's a little bit of management by exception, an example of it, in addition to the notifications you receive when errors occur, to the right people or distribution list in your organization. So that's a very brief presentation on our platform, which is Vantage Point EDI, and how the right solution, and I'll point out the word solution again, can enable tight integration, high levels of automation management by exception with the Dynamics platform without customizations in the Dynamics ERP environment. So hopefully there was benefit to everyone on the call today. At least learned a few things. And here's our contact information. But before we end the presentation, Adam, I want to open it up to any questions you might have received during the course of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. It said at the beginning of the event, there's a Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen, so if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in, and Glenn will try to answer them, as many as we get. It looks like we do have some questions that have come in. Gentleman asked, once EDI is set up, how easy is it to set up multiple partners?
Okay, so the question is, how easy is it to take, let's say, one partner and a process and then apply it to additional partners? So that's a great question because we, we try to make everything as consistent as conceivably possible. So for example, I might have a vendor-facing relationship with a company like General Electric. So here's a General Electric trading partner configuration and a process. And one of the things that we do is we relate, their ID, their identification in the world of EDI back to Dynamics. Now, in my case, General Electric is vendor ID 10,000. They are a vendor, so the partner type is important. And here are the documents that I exchange with them. Now, if I want to take this relationship and clone it into another partner, for example, I want to take General Electric, and now I want to do business with Westinghouse, then I can take that partner, and they could be West. Sorry. And their vendor ID could be 11,000. And now I've taken all the settings for one partner, cloned it into another, and I'm ready to start testing and doing transaction processing with Westinghouse. Now, if not all partners do the same exact thing, so you might need maps. We provide those maps, so if you purchase a trading partner from us, then, and they have different maps than, say, General Electric to Westinghouse, you can purchase that partner kit from us, and you hit the Import Kits button, you type in the installation code, it downloads everything you need, and then you just go in there and relate that partner's customer ID or vendor ID or whatever that accounting relationship is in there, and then you're ready to start testing. Any other questions?
Somebody's asking, how are the mappings set up?
Okay, so there's two scenarios for mapping. The first is you acquire the maps from data masons. So we've got a massive library of 11,000 plus maps that you can purchase relatively inexpensively and then apply it so you don't have to do your own mapping. But some organizations decide that they want to do their own mapping. So we'll provide you with the mapping tool that our team members use internally to deliver all the maps that we do, along with training and starter maps, so you can be assured of being successful, and we'll support you with the mapping tools. So either you purchase the maps from Data Masons and we maintain it and take care of it for you, or you can acquire the mapping tool and do it yourself, which goes back to the flexibility business model, which was one of the points on the slide deck.
Someone's also asking how the maps are priced.
So typical map format costs about $500. And then there's an annual maintenance to keep it synchronized with the partner. Our base kit costs $500 and for partner includes an invoice map, an inbound purchase order, and all of the print templates for any document that they might send, as long as it's a EDI standard like FACT or X12. If it's a format, if it's a custom file format, then we have different pricing for that, and you just have to check with us because we've got different variants of custom files.
Another question came in. How do you charge if not by transaction kilo characters?
So we charge software license. Software can be purchased, up front where you own the software and you just pay an annual maintenance support fee from that point forward. Or we offer a subscription model where you pay, less up front, much less up front, and you pay a higher maintenance and support fee ongoing. That's for the software. For maps, it's the same concept, so you can, purchase maps or and so forth. So we don't force you to do kilocharacter fees or transaction fees. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not have a partner that requires a van, use of a van, and there are transaction fees associated with that. But if the partner can receive data directly, we support that, and we support every van out there, and we also offer van service at a very affordable rate. So, there's some things out of our control, which is the behavior of partners and their business their dealings with other companies that might force you to pay kilocharacter fees, but we help you avoid them whenever conceivably possible.
Okay, another question. We are on AX 2009. Is this portable to AX 2012 or AX 7?
The answer is yes and yes. Our first AX certification was on 2009. We've been supporting AX since 2.5. Our first implementation was in 2001. We have many customers on 2009. And one of the beauties of porting your system in Vantage Point over to a new version of AX, it's simply a matter of pointing the system to the new version of AX, and you just go in there and you change your, your version. So, for example, Dynamics 2009, and then when you go to 2012, you just change that, and of course, there's testing. Integration documents, the schemas change between 2009 and 2012, as well as with AX 7. So there are other things, but the concept that all the data is stored the same way. All the partner-related maps don't change. So all the outbound maps to the external world don't change. It's just the format of the documents going into AX that change, and that's just part and parcel of changes made by Microsoft. I'll just say here that for Dynamics Nav and GP, it's an identical scenario. So eConnect for GP and XML port formats for Nav, they can change from version to version. And so there might be changes in the schemas going into the ERP platforms, but all the outbound documents are not impacted, in terms of their formats. Which could be big, because if you have 40 trading partners and they all have 40 different invoices and 40 different ASNs, et cetera, you don't want to have to rework those those formats. So that's one of the beauties of Vantage Point's model. Any other questions?
Okay. Yep, we've got another question. We received 852 transactions from 10 different distributors. Everyone has a different EDI structure. How would Vantage handle this?
So the model in Vantage Point is that when we receive data in, and I didn't get into this in detail, but all the data gets into a common storage method. And for example, an inbound purchase order ultimately ends up in a data store that you can see it with all the details in a screen that looks something like this. So we stage the data in a very uniform manner. So if we're getting in data in 20 different formats, they're all going to end up looking like this. So that when we do our integration into AX or NAV or GP, that process is consistent. And so we map to the format here, and then everything is uniform, which is good for you and for your internal team. And good for us, too. Any other questions?
Does this solution include an AS2 connector?
We do not write AS2 software. We work with another company, so we have a very cost-effective AS2 solution, but it's not native. What we support is all versions of secure FTP, SSL and SSH, as well as straight-up FTP, and then folder exchanges with an AS2 platform. But we don't force you to use any specific AS2.
Here's another question. What percentage of your customers do their own mapping versus buying maps from data masons?
The percentage is relatively low, about 10%. I think at the end of the day, most companies want to focus on what they do well, which is, managing and transacting their business. Sometimes it makes economic sense, or you have the right skill sets and so forth to do your own mapping. But according to our records, it's 9% of our customers have licensed their mapping system.
Here's another question, Glenn. Do you have relationships with the Global Healthcare Exchange?
Yes, GHX, yep.
Yeah.
We have a number of customers that exchange with them. The challenge with GHX is that they represent many parties behind the scenes, hospitals and clinics and such. So I talked a little bit about managing the relationships between one point of data coming in, like through GHX, and then all the customers that might be coming through that one stream of data, and managing it all the way into the ERP and then back out to them. So, but the answer is yes, and it's actually a good example of some of those challenges.
Okay, here's another question. Are there preset coding rules for EDI for freight and for transportation?
Absolutely. There's some very specific standards. Some of the documents in freight and transportation can be challenging to map out in the ERP platform, any of the dynamics. So, for example, common one we do is load tenders, and this includes, motor carrier, trains, ship, ocean freight, those sorts of things. And, in some cases they might need that data delivered in a sequence that instructs the carrier how to load the truck, so that, if they're making multiple stops, that they can drop off the goods in the right places and everything. And those concepts don't necessarily exist in all the ERP platforms. So we work with you to make sure you know how to populate the data so that we can get it in the right sequence, and then get it out to the partners the way they want it. But yeah, we support I didn't mention this, but Vantage Point supports now 69 different document sets, which includes probably 10 different freight-related transportation documents integrated in and out of Dynamics.
Glenn, we have another question. Do you have any customers who need to submit to the federal GUDID database?
GUDID.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't answer that question off the top of my head.
Here's another question. Is there a way to break out multiple discounts in descriptions?
Yes. Yes. Well, out of the box, the only ERP system that I think does it well is Dynamics AX. They have a companion file to the sales order, which enables you to break out the discounts, whether it's a percentage or a dollar amount. However, we've worked it out to make it supportable in both GP and NAV as well. So yeah, because if you say, hey, just update the discount percent, you have no idea what how much you spent on advertising or on new store or slotting allowances. So yeah, you need to have that information broken out in the ERP so that you get it for accounting purposes and that we can report it back to the trading partner accurately as well.
Okay, we had another question that just came in. Is the annual maintenance fee a fixed percentage? If so, what percentage? I think you said the initial charge is $500 per map.
Yeah, there's 2 percentages, and then we have different levels of support that could lower or increase the maintenance, but generally it runs around 20 to 24%, 24 for maps and 20 for the software. And maps are higher, by the way, because of the unpredictability and the external nature of the changes, and because we might get a request. Say Walmart goes to a totally new EDI standard, Data Masons has to, replicate and build those maps and deliver them to all customers that are on maintenance. And so it could be a lot of work and a lot of value in the maintenance, not just, hey, a software update whenever, we want to add a new feature.
Let's give people just another minute or so to submit their questions, see if we get any more.
Well, I'll just make a comment on the maintenance. We also, of course, spend a lot of time making sure that we support new releases of Dynamics. So, Microsoft is releasing updates much more frequently, CU version, CU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We spend a lot of time staying in sync with Microsoft, and that's part of your maintenance value, that we're constantly staying in sync with them, and so that you don't have to buy upgrades for AX7 or NAV 2016.
Glenn, we have another question that just came in. Is there a cloud-hosted version on the solution?
The system runs on Azure, and so yes, we can run it in the cloud and provide you with a hosted version, integrating to the ERP through web services. So the answer is yes.
Okay, we have another question. Let me see if I can read this correctly. So if foreign trading partners have very specific demands, where is the setup that for trading partner A, a specific value needs to be added in the invoice, while for trading partner B, is it not required?
So the answer is that all the rules processing is based in the maps and some configuration data that's configurable at the trading partner. So in my case, I have my partner Target, And again, these are the documents that we trade with them. The invoice that I generated earlier is controlled by this map right here. And that map had the instruction that said to put that ref IA 740 into the spot that it is. And within that map, I could say this is a mandatory piece of information. Try to get it from the PO. If it's not in the, we didn't get this order via PO, then try to get it someplace else if it might be available, and step through all these rules to get the right value. So if I look at, you know, my next trading partner, which could be, I'll be West Germany, or Germany, I shouldn't say West Germany. You know, it could be a totally different format, totally different requirements, and it's all controlled by putting in this value right here. And there are other settings I should have, you know, how to calculate which dates are important for integration and which, you know, are we doing price verification before it gets to the ERP or not, you know, those sorts of things. Any other questions?
Yep, we just had a couple more that just came in. Can we add our own custom maps?
Yes, if you license our mapping tool, you can do anything you want.
Okay, here's another question. Do your ship confirmations, ASNs, support AX integrated third-party shipping solutions such as UPS's WorldShip or ProShip?
Absolutely. We're not, you know, we support the AXR3 warehouse shipping. We have many customers that run non-AX related shipping solutions. There's a couple of companies that specialize in, you know, like WorldShip type integration into Dynamics AX. We already have customers that use those scenarios. We also have customers that use full warehouse systems like Red Prairie and Manhattan integrated into AX. So we can get data directly from those shipping systems and those warehouse systems, or we can get it via AX. So if sometimes those systems, you know, our customers don't have those, you know, all the shipment information available in AX, so we might have to get it directly out of the warehouse. So the answer is yes, that we work with those type of scenarios.
Okay, Glenn, we have another question. What is the average number of maps that would be needed? I'm not sure what context this person is referring to, but you know, that was all the question that they asked.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you know, our pricing and the need for maps is really driven by your partners. So you might have, for example, you know, we might have a customer that only has 3 customers doing EDI with them, and that's all they need, and 2 of them use the same exact invoice format. So they would only buy 1 map. So we charge based on the format, not based on the partner. And then the third partner might need a map. So in that case, you'd have 2 invoice maps. Then you might have one of them doing an ASN, so that would be 3 maps, and one's doing a PO acknowledgement, that's 4. So there's so many variables that makes it impossible to answer, you know, what the average is. We have customers with, you know, literally hundreds of maps, and some with only 1.
Okay, Glenn, we have another question. How big is your footprint in Europe?
Okay, so we have a large number of customers in Europe. We're going to be at Convergence EMEA in December. We have support teams that cover all the time zones, including European time zones. So in Europe, we probably have over 50 customers, and with intent to grow in that region. And also, I'll just mention one more thing, that Vantage Point is multi-currency and multilingual.
Okay, we have another question. How do customers/users of, for example, NAV react to the required setup and parameters for mapping if you demo Vantage Point?
Could you just repeat that question again?
Sure. How do NAV customers, for example, react to the required setup and parameters for mapping if you demo Vantage Point?
How do they react? I think that most of our people that see a demonstration of the software, and I can't get into a mapping demonstration, but the mapping tool really explains a lot. But a lot of the NAV customers that come and talk to us have heavy customization, and a lot of them are stuck on older versions of NAV. And you know, one of the things that inhibits their ability to upgrade is the customizations themselves. So a lot of them that have come to that crossroads are usually very happy to see all the code that's been written externalized in Vantage Point, and you know, in a manner, because maps never have to be upgraded. They're always compliant in Vantage Point. So if we write a map, and we have maps that we've written 10 years ago that run just the same, keep updating Vantage Point all you want, and the maps continue working. So generally speaking, we get a very favorable level of interest from those types of companies.
Let's see if anyone, someone actually just wrote another question. It was the same person that just asked that previous question. So NAV users do not have to worry about the maps?
Absolutely. They can purchase the maps, totally managed. They don't ever have to worry about the words EDI and what partners want. And you just can purchase them. You hit the import kits button that I showed earlier and just set it up. And we'll help them in any way that they need.
Okay, looks like just give people last chance to kind of submit their questions. Okay, looks like that might be all the questions. So why don't we end here? Actually, look, you know what? Another one just came in. Do you support three-way EDI?
Three-way EDI. I'm not sure I know what that means. It might mean three-way matching. Okay.
Yeah, he gave an example. Let me read that. For example, a customer places an order for a customized garment. So a PO is placed to the stock vendor for the product line, and a PO is placed to the custom shop for the customization line.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Can we pull multiple transactions, in a sense, out of a production order or from within the sales order? So, for example, you know, a sales order is received. We integrate that sales order. It spawns purchase orders or work orders. Take that information and transmit it out in the form of a flat file or an EDI document to other partners and complete all the transactions, you know, to kind of stitch it all together electronically. The answer is yes. Hopefully I understood that scenario. But you can reach out to us if you want to get into further detail, but that's a sort of complicated question for a webinar.
And people are asking whether or not they can receive copies of the slides and if the session was recorded. And yes, session's recorded. We'll post the recorded link online, and we'll email it out to everybody as well, probably in the next couple of days. All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions, so why don't we end here. Glenn, I want to thank you so much for presenting, and I want to thank everybody for attending as well. Hope you found the session informative. And as Glenn said, if you have any further questions that you didn't get to, please feel free to reach out to him directly. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.